Works quite well. What you do is you brainstorm all the customer activities around a potential use of your product or around their disease state. And I'll show you an example in a minute. You identify the touch points. Where in their whole process can you intervene? And then lastly, you meet with the suppliers and try and come up with programs that are relevant, original, impactful, and measurable so that you could actually make a difference. Here's what you would come up with. So you put a flip chart up, you start to brainstorm. This is an example of a patient one. Ideally, what you do is you do it for the patients, the doctors, the pharmacists, every one of your customer groups, and look for commonality and touch points. So this one, for example, would say customers' symptoms. Where do they go? They go to the web, they go talk to their friends, figure out what they have, go to the pharmacy, pick up an OTC, they get more symptoms, they search it again on the web, they go to the GP, they visit to the GP, they get lab tests, they get a script, they may get samples. You go through that whole gamut, all the way through to seeing a specialist, surgery if needed, all that kind of thing. And then you look at that, you do it for patients, doctors, etc. You say, what are the touch points we can be involved in? And where do I link them? And that's where more and more programs are starting to come out, is finding the common touch points. And the example I'll give you in a minute is a good example of that. Okay. So what can you really measure from a standpoint of ROI? If we look at the traditional programs we've had, rep calls, you can measure reach and frequency. Can you really measure ROI? Yeah, it's tricky. Selling material, that's a hard one. Samples, do samples actually bring in money or do they cannibalize the business? Physical samples, it's a question that people have debated for years. Journal ads, ever have a boss say, how much are we going to make for that with that journal ad you're doing? It's a tough one to answer. CME programs, direct mail, we get BRCs, we measure it by BRCs sometimes. Websites, ad boards. The traditional programs have always been hard to measure for a number of reasons. Lack of metrics, and there's a lot of other things happening around that frankly just make it really difficult to segment that program and determine what really that contributed to the whole sales. So one example here that I'd like to put is the sample prescribing. They call them loyalty programs. These are starting to really grab hold more and more, and they're branded. But what they really get, and I used SDI as an example. There's other ones out there. They're not all the same, but this is one I tend to know best. So it's real-time patient initiation longitudinal data. So you can follow a patient from the demographic standpoint, obviously not from their name, but you can follow what's happening with that patient. You can identify the doctor, the pharmacy, and the patient types at the point of RX fulfillment. Now you're starting to get some metrics that link in touch points of different customers. And you get reimbursement data. So you can look at it and say, how many of them of our customers are reimbursed in any way? Could I have a bit of water, please? Thanks. So reimbursement data, and you can intervene at that point with reimbursement as well. And then the last thing is automatic fulfillment. So as soon as someone runs out of samples, you know automatically which doctor ran out, they can be sent automatically. So, and that's been something. Samples run out, doctors no samples, you potentially could lose business. Not in this case. Thank you. So this program has a lot of benefits to it. You've probably seen it before, some of you. It has the different data in it. I won't concentrate on that too much. But the whole program, it's all coming up in pieces here. The whole program has that triangle of customers going from the doctor to the patient to the pharmacy and gathering all that data. And that's the strength of it. So now if we look at it compared to a direct mail program. So a direct mail program, normally you look at BRCs. Here, what you tend to get with a direct mail program is you actually send out those cards to the doctor. And you know which doctor got which cards. So you get a quantified RX response. You know how many prescriptions actually came out of that mailing from which doctors and went to which pharmacies and what type of patients. It links the doctors to pharmacists, as we mentioned. You end up getting the RX size. So you can say, this strength is being written and this is how many refills are being written. You get reimbursement data, auto-fulfillment. With the BRC, you never got auto-fulfillment. And territory data can be compared to other data sources. So this is the type of program where now we're starting to see an ROI that you can measure. And that's what it looks like there. So the cards would go out, branded cards. A rep-involved program is another way to look at it. It's pay as you go. So you don't use up the samples unless they actually use the card. In fact, there's no samples to use up. It comes from top-line sales. Measures rep efforts and their success rates. They're notified when the fulfillment is low. So as soon as the doctor's running out, you know the doctors that use it. The rep has a reason to go back into that office to see the doctor. A great way to see high-prescribing doctors. It links to different doctors. And lastly, the territory data can go into your CRM program. So you've got the territory data that the rep can do to target their actual doctors. So again, from a rep standpoint, the traditional rep standpoint, this fits in quite nicely. And in the last example of the same program, and what's neat about technology is it can be used in different types of programs. It's very scalable. Is you get real-time assessment of patient enrollment. And what you can see in some cases with a clinical study, one of the worst things you can get is the doctors, your investigators, having patients who don't fit the inclusion or exclusion criteria. And so what ends up happening, CRA goes out there and half your patients don't work. Here you've got real-time assessment of that. So you can make sure you get to investigators immediately who are recruiting the wrong patients. It saves a lot of money and time. KOLs gain experience writing the scripts, and so rather than giving them the material, they're practicing writing scripts, which is what you want them to do, and pharmacy exposure to product movement. So 3 examples there of the type of programs that are coming out with technology, and I think it's making a big difference. Last slide then, key considerations when assessing a program. Can you measure this program as a standalone? That's always really tough, and I'm not sure any program can be measured as a true standalone, but to what degree can you? What actions would you take as a result of the data? Is a pilot program feasible, and would it be scalable? And lastly, innovative programs should be viewed as a potential for continuous improvement. So if you're doing something that's sort of bleeding edge, brand new, you've got to realize that it's not going to be perfectly right the first time. It's going to evolve over time. So measuring is critical. And that's it. Thank you very much.